Good afternoon, viewers and listeners. Today, I'm here to talk about a funny but yet very, very controversial topic. Yes, this topic almost destroyed the summer of 2018. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to be talking about, is water truly wet? Yes, this topic was simply a joke, stringing from Facebook posts to meme pages, but it eventually even gained the argument against scientists and many people. I am one of the very few today who is going to explain to you on how water is truly effectively wet and not just a description that many of you may believe it is. Some even go as far as me to say that water is even dry. Many even go to Google, to the internet, to get their source of answer to say that water is not wet, but wet is a description to describe water. Very interesting topic that here we have at hand. But I am here to explain to you all that water is wet. Here's my explanation. I say wet is more than a description because for something to become wet, that substance must already be wet in itself. For example, if you pour water on a sheet of paper, what happens to that paper? It becomes wet. But if you pour water on water, does the water become wet? Or is it already wet? This is a great example that shows that water must be wet within itself to create other objects to be wet. It cannot be dry because how can it mysteriously create paper to become wet or dry objects to be wet? It just doesn't make sense. So this proves to me that water in itself is wet. And it also proves that the internet sometimes can be very misleading and very deceptive because there are many articles that say water is wet within itself. I even have the definition of the state of being wet and the description of wet. It states, a cover with a liquid which moistens or covered or saturated with water or another liquid. Again, covered or saturated with water or any other liquid that is wet within itself.
Let me tell you something.
This simply implies that water has to be wet within itself to create other objects that are dry to become wet. Some will even continue to argue that water cannot be wet if you pour it onto other liquids or water itself, asking if water can make other liquids wet, even though, as previously stated, wet is when something that is a liquid, which is already wet, saturates or covers an object that is dry. So yes, it is wet because it's the water that you're pouring on another liquid or water itself is wet itself as well. It can be a controversial and yet very confusing topic, as many of you all can tell, but it has been a growing controversial topic over the years.